Have you ever walked away from someone feeling drained, and you didn't even know why? They didn't scream. They didn't insult you. In fact, they smiled. They listened. They even complimented you. And yet, something about their presence left your spirit a little dimmer. It's easy to think of evil as loud, obvious, monstrous. But the most dangerous kind rarely looks that way. It whispers. It flatters. It wears the face of concern while planting seeds of doubt in your mind. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're already entangled, questioning your worth, your memories, even your sanity. But what if you could spot them before they take hold? In this video, I'll walk you through 10 clear signs that reveal when you're dealing with someone whose intentions are anything but good. These aren't just red flags, they're emotional fingerprints of toxic influence. And armed with the wisdom of Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, you'll learn how to protect your energy, guard your mind, and reclaim your inner peace. Stay with me till the end, because some of these signs are hiding in plain sight, and once you see them, you'll never unsee them again. 1. Constant manipulation, when kindness is just a cage. He who has many fears also has many things to manipulate. Seneca didn't write those words lightly. He understood that fear, especially fear of being unloved, unwanted, or inadequate, can make us vulnerable to people who know exactly how to use it against us. Let me tell you a story. There was a time I worked alongside someone I genuinely respected. He praised me in public, called me talented, made me feel seen in a way others hadn't. But something didn't sit right. Behind closed doors, subtle shifts began to unfold. He'd casually point out tiny flaws in my work, exaggerating them just enough to cast doubt. He'd offer help that felt more like surveillance. And when I finally gathered the courage to ask him about it, he smiled and said, "I'm just trying to help you grow." For a moment, I believed him. I thought maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I did need his guidance. But what I didn't realize then was this. He wasn't trying to help me grow. He was trying to make me dependent, to make me doubt myself so that I would need him to feel enough. That is the essence of manipulation. It doesn't always come with raised voices or clear threats. Often, it disguises itself as kindness, concern, mentorship. But its real purpose is control. Manipulative people don't seek connection. They seek compliance. They carefully observe your insecurities, your soft spots, and twist them into levers. The Stoics were clear on this. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus, the moment someone makes you feel like you need their approval to feel worthy, you've given them the keys to your mind. So how do you take back control? Clarity, self-awareness, boundaries. Ask yourself, does this person make me stronger or more dependent? Do they build me up or subtly tear me down while smiling? You don't need to argue with a manipulator. You don't owe them proof of your worth. You only need to step away from the game, because that's what it is to them, a game of power, not care. Walk away, reclaim your voice, and remind yourself that true guidance doesn't come with strings attached. It comes with respect. It comes with freedom. And anyone who trades your peace for their control was never a mentor. They were a master in disguise. 2. A mask of charm, when smiles deceive and words disarm. Appearances are often deceptive. That's not just a proverb, it's a warning. One that Epictetus echoed when he said, "Appearances, no matter how dazzling, often hide the truth beneath." Have you ever met someone who seemed too perfect? Their charm felt effortless, like something from a well-written script. They knew exactly what to say to make you feel special, understood, even seen. At first, it was intoxicating, but with time something felt off. You couldn't quite name it, but deep down your gut whispered, something's not right. I once knew someone like that. To everyone around them, they were magnetic. Compliments flowed like poetry. They remembered birthdays, noticed the smallest details, made every interaction feel like it mattered. But slowly, I started noticing the cracks. Behind closed doors, the warmth turned cold. Their words, once empowering, became subtly competitive. They'd lift you up, only to watch how far you'd fall when they pulled their support away. And when there was nothing more to gain from you, they'd vanish. Worse, they'd talk about you, the same person they once praised, to others in hushed tones laced with judgment. That's when I realized their charm wasn't a gift. It was a weapon. Used sincerely, charm builds connection. Used manipulatively, it disarms your defenses. It convinces you to trust too soon, too deeply. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." What color, then, does someone wear when they use affection to hide selfish intent? Their words may glitter, but their actions stain. So how do you see past the mask? Observe. How do they treat people who can offer them nothing? Do they show the same respect when the spotlight is off? Trust your instincts. If you feel both flattered and uneasy, pay attention to that tension. It's your inner wisdom trying to speak. And most importantly, look beyond the charm. Because real goodness never needs to impress. It doesn't seek applause. It just is. The Stoics teach us that truth doesn't wear a costume. It lives in silence, in action, in consistency. So the next time you find yourself swept up by someone's charm, don't just listen to what they say. Watch what they do when they think no one's watching. 3. Lies without conscience, when truth becomes inconvenient. If it isn't right, don't do it. If it isn't true, don't say it. Marcus Aurelius wrote this as a call to virtue. But for some people, truth is not a compass, it's an obstacle. Something to bend, twist, or discard when it no longer serves their agenda. And these people, they don't lie by accident. They lie with intention, with calculation. Their deceit is not sloppy, it's polished. I remember a colleague who always had a story. She'd talk about leading major projects, saving the day, winning over clients. At first, I admired her, until I started seeing the cracks, emails that didn't add up, documents that told a different story. And when I gently questioned her version of events, she didn't defend. She deflected. She accused me of misunderstanding. She changed the subject, layered on more narrative. She spun the web tighter. That's the art of the conscious liar. They don't just distort reality. They make you doubt your own. They inject just enough confusion to make you second-guess yourself until you no longer trust what you saw, heard, or felt. And that's when they win. Because when you no longer trust yourself, you start trusting them. But the Stoics were never interested in illusion. They taught us to watch actions, not words. Because lies need upkeep, more lies to cover the first. Truth, it stands on its own. It doesn't shift under pressure. It doesn't require defense. So how do you protect yourself? Look for inconsistency. Do their stories change depending on the audience? Do their words align with their choices? Ask questions, not to accuse, but to clarify. See how they respond. Do they answer or do they spin? And when the evidence piles up, when their version of reality no longer holds, don't wait for a confession. They won't give it, not because they don't know the truth, but because they believe you'll stop asking if they just keep talking. Remember what Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond that matters." So respond with clarity, respond with boundaries, and walk away with your peace intact. Because once you learn to trust your eyes, no liar, no matter how clever, can blind you again. For lack of empathy, the cold silence behind your pain. Seneca once said, "We are waves of the same sea, leaves of the same tree, flowers of the same garden." A reminder that we're not meant to walk this life disconnected from one another. But what happens when someone treats your pain as an inconvenience? When your vulnerability is met with a shrug, or worse, a smirk? Empathy is the quiet thread that binds us as human beings. It's what allows us to step into someone else's story, to feel what they feel, even if just for a moment. Without it, Relationships become hollow, transactions instead of connections. I once sat across from a friend during one of the hardest seasons of my life. I opened up about something that had been breaking me inside, and instead of leaning in, she laughed. "That's nothing. You should hear what happened to me today." Just like that, the conversation shifted. My pain disappeared. Or rather, she erased it. That wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. Because people like this don't want to carry your burden. They want to keep the spotlight on themselves. Your sorrow is competition, your joy a threat. The Stoics understood the gravity of this. Seneca reminds us, no one can live happily who has regard to himself alone. And yet, for the cold-hearted, other people are tools, used only when convenient. Their empathy is performative at best, absent at worst. So how do you recognize them? It's not in the grand gestures. It's in the little moments, when you share something personal and get silence. When your success is met with lukewarm praise. When your struggle becomes a segue to their story. True empathy holds space. It listens. It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't compete. So what do you do when someone consistently fails to show it? Protect your emotional energy. Set boundaries, not walls but doors. Let in those who see you, not just look at you. The Stoics didn't teach us to harden. They taught us to discern, to reserve our energy for what uplifts and strengthens. Because when empathy is absent, connection withers, and your peace deserves better than someone who treats your wounds like background noise. Choose people who lean in, not those who turn away. Because in a world full of noise, empathy is a rare silence, one that heals. 5. The hunger for control, when guidance becomes a leash. Marcus Aurelius once reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But what if someone's sole intention is to take that power away from you? Control doesn't always arrive with force. Sometimes it disguises itself as love, mentorship, or concern. At first, it sounds like, I just want what's best for you. But over time it becomes, you can't do this without me. I once trusted someone like that. They gave great advice. Thoughtful, helpful, at least it seemed. But gradually their words shifted. Instead of empowering me, they began to question my decisions, plant doubts about my instincts. Once, when I was invited to lead a major project, they smiled and said, I just don't think you're ready. Let me handle it. And I let them, because by then, I no longer trusted my own voice. That's the trap. They chip away at your confidence until you're no longer sure whether your choices are your own, or there's whispered through your mouth. To someone hungry for control, your independence is a threat. They don't want you to grow. They want you to orbit them, forever needing, forever doubting, forever small. Epictetus said it plainly. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. But freedom isn't just physical. It's mental. It's emotional. It's the ability to say, this is what I believe. This is what I choose. Malicious control isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like guidance. Sometimes it looks like care. But its outcome is always the same. You shrink while they grow. So what do? Pause. Ask yourself, is this person encouraging me to become stronger or more dependent? Do they celebrate your growth or subtly undermine it? Redefine the relationship. True mentors don't hold power over you. They light the way, then step aside so you can walk it. Take your mind back. Reclaim the right to choose, even if that choice means walking away from someone you once thought was safe. Because in the end, Marcus Aurelius was right. The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts. Guard them, protect them, and never let anyone else write the story of your mind. 6. Blame games and deflection, when accountability becomes a vanishing act. Seneca once observed, people prefer to trust appearances rather than exercise judgment. And this is exactly what manipulative individuals count on. Because if they can shape the appearance of innocence, They never have to own the truth. I once worked on a project with someone I considered a close friend. We started with excitement and a shared vision. But as things began to unravel, so did her loyalty. Mistakes were made, some hers, some mine. But every time something went wrong, she'd point her finger sideways, never in the mirror. Maybe if you had been more organized. I thought I mentioned that to you. You must have misunderstood. At first, I thought she was trying to help. But then I realized she wasn't helping, she was reframing reality. That's the art of the blame game. It's not always about loud accusations. Sometimes it's the quiet, passive shift of weight. Enough to make you wonder, wait, was it my fault? People who play this game don't just avoid accountability. They weaponize it. They craft stories where they are always the victim, misunderstood, mistreated, never responsible. They count on your empathy, your willingness to give the benefit of the doubt, and they use it to escape the consequences of their actions. But the Stoics saw through this long ago. Marcus Aurelius taught, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. Truth doesn't need defending. It just needs presence. While lies, they demand a performance, a script, a cast of scapegoats. So how do you respond when someone turns every mistake into your fault? You step out of the illusion. You separate fact from fiction. Ask, what actually happened here? Am I being blamed, or am I being manipulated? Then you hold the line. Not to argue, but to anchor. Because once you stop playing the role they wrote for you, their story collapses. Set boundaries. Don't engage in their emotional theater. Let their deflection hit the wall of your clarity. The truth doesn't require noise. It only asks that you stay grounded. Because when someone refuses to be accountable, they reveal not just poor behavior, but a fractured character. And you don't owe them your confusion. You owe yourself peace. 7. The pleasure of pain. When someone finds joy in your suffering, associate with those who make you better. That's what Epictetus advised. But what if someone smiles, not when you rise, but when you fall? Most people don't clap when others stumble, but some do. And they do it quietly, in the corners, in their hearts, in the curl of a smirk they try to hide. It often starts small. A sarcastic joke when you make a mistake. A little chuckle when someone else is publicly embarrassed. Or that hollow-sounding, ah, when you open up about something painful, but their eyes don't match their words. I remember a woman in my circle who seemed invested in everyone's life. She asked questions, always seemed concerned, but there was a strange energy behind it. One day, a coworker was harshly criticized in front of a team. She didn't look shocked. She looked satisfied. That moment stayed with me. Over time, it became obvious. She didn't want to grow with others. She wanted to rise above them by stepping on their wounds. People like this don't seek excellence. They seek advantage. They don't build their own strength. They feast on weakness around them. Seneca once said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." But for some, adversity isn't a teacher. It's ammunition. They collect failures, not their own, but others, to validate their own fragile sense of power. And it's not always overt. Sometimes they frame it as honesty. I'm just being real. Or as advice. I just think they needed to be taken down a notch. But listen closely. The truth has no joy in cruelty. It doesn't gloat. It doesn't linger over someone's hurt. Only envy does that. Only insecurity needs others to bleed, so it can feel full. So what do you do when someone close to you delights in discomfort? You remove your suffering from their stage. Don't perform your pain for their entertainment. Withdraw, observe, protect. Choose relationships where your joy is celebrated, where your growth isn't a threat. Because in the company of the right people, your victories inspire, not intimidate. Your wounds are treated with care, not curiosity. Remember, those who take pleasure in pain are often trying to outrun their own, but that doesn't make them safe. Your peace is not their playground. So walk away, and walk toward those who rise with you, not over you. 8. Isolation as a weapon when they cut your ties to tighten their grip. Marcus Aurelius once said, "We are made for cooperation like feet, like hands, like eyelids." Connection is natural. It's where we draw strength, perspective, and grounding. So why would someone try to pull you away from the people who care for you? Simple. Because the more alone you feel, the easier you are to control. I once had a friend who seemed to care deeply. She'd say things like, "I just think your best friend isn't good for you," or, "Your family doesn't really understand who you are, not the way I do." At first, it felt protective. I thought, she sees what others don't. But as time passed, her voice got louder, while the voices of others around me grew distant. It wasn't accidental. It was precise. A slow erosion of trust, until I felt unsure of every bond except the one she controlled. This is how toxic isolation works. Not by cutting people off with scissors, but by cutting them out of your heart, one whisper of doubt at a time. To someone who seeks power, your support system is an obstacle. So they chip at it, not obviously, but persistently. They want to become your sole confidant, your only mirror. Because if no one else is close, no one else can help you see the truth. But the Stoics never advocated self-reliance as loneliness. They believed in strong ties built on virtue and trust. Seneca wrote, "One of the most beautiful qualities of true friendship is to understand and to be understood." Toxic people invert that. They make you misunderstood so they can play the translator. But don't let them. So what do you do when someone tries to isolate you under the guise of protection? You reconnect, not just with others, but with your own memory. Remember who you were before their voice became the loudest. Reach out to those who lifted you before they arrived. Test the waters again. You'll often find that the people you were pushed away from never left. And most importantly, remember this. Anyone who loves you will never try to cut you off from love itself. True connection expands your life. It doesn't cage it, so protect your circle. Because in moments of doubt, they might just be the ones who remind you who you really are. 9. Jealousy in disguise, when their advice is a blade wrapped in velvet. Seneca once said, "Envy is the ulcer of the soul. It eats from the inside, silently, slowly, bitterly. And when someone hasn't healed their own, they won't celebrate your light. They'll try to dim it. But envy today doesn't always snarl or scream. Sometimes it smiles. I once had a friend who always showed interest in my work. She congratulated me, praised my wins, clapped when I succeeded. But then came the add-ons. "That's amazing, but I think you could have done even better. I'm so proud of you, just don't get too comfortable." At first, I took it as thoughtful feedback. But over time I realized her compliments always came with a subtle sting. A tiny cut beneath the ribbon. That's how disguised jealousy works. It rarely tells you, "You're not good." It whispers, "You're not quite good enough." These people don't want to see you fail outright. They want you to doubt your success, to shrink just enough that you no longer feel confident, only cautious. They'll offer advice that feels helpful but heavy. They'll compare you to someone just slightly better. They'll suggest higher standards, not to elevate you but to exhaust you. Why? Because when you shine, it highlights their own shadows. And instead of facing that discomfort, they try to dim your brilliance. But Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And those thoughts, your sense of self-worth, must be guarded like a sacred flame." So, how do you tell if someone's praise is poisoned? Feel the weight of their words. Do you leave the conversation lifted or subtly deflated? Do you feel encouraged or corrected? And most importantly, trust your gut. You are wiser than you know. A true friend celebrates without reservation. They don't lace your victories with warnings. They don't offer feedback that leaves your heart questioning instead of expanding. So when you hear that small voice inside whispering, that didn't feel like love. Listen, because that whisper, that's you reclaiming your clarity. Your light was not meant to be filtered through someone else's shadow. Shine anyway. 10. The unrepentant heart. When change is off the table, so should be your time. Marcus Aurelius gave us this timeless advice. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. But not everyone is interested in being good. Some are only interested in being right. I once knew someone who never apologized. Ever. Not when they snapped out of line. Not when they deeply hurt someone. And if you tried to talk to them about it, they'd say things like, "You're too sensitive. It's not a big deal. Other people have done worse." At first, I gave them grace, then excuses, then silence. But over time, I realized they weren't avoiding responsibility. They were rejecting growth. That's the core of an unrepentant heart. Not just an unwillingness to say, "I was wrong," but an active resistance to becoming better, to reflect, to repair, to evolve. They live in a fortress of justifications, thick walls built from blame, pride, and deflection. And inside those walls, they mistake stubbornness for strength. But Stoicism teaches us that real strength is vulnerability, that humility is a path, not a weakness. Seneca once said, "To err is human, but to persist in error out of pride is the mark of a fool." So ask yourself, are you holding space for someone who has no intention of stepping into it? Are you waiting for accountability from someone who treats it like poison? Because not everyone is willing to change, and not everyone deserves front row access to your life while they refuse to grow. You can't fix someone who denies they're broken, and it's not your job to carry what they refuse to lift. So what do? You let go, not with anger, but with clarity. You walk away from cycles that only lead back to the same pain. Surround yourself with people who choose awareness over ego, growth over comfort, and truth over pride. People who understand that saying, "I was wrong," is not surrender, it's evolution. 11. The invalidation reflex. When your feelings are too much for them to handle. Sometimes the most devastating wound isn't loud. It doesn't come from shouting or insults. It comes from a quiet phrase, spoken with a calm voice and a condescending smile. You're overreacting. You're being too sensitive. It wasn't that serious. At first you pause. Maybe they're right. Maybe you're making things bigger than they are. You question yourself, not just the moment, but your entire perception of reality. And that's how it starts. Emotional invalidation isn't always brutal. Often it's subtle, almost casual. But the effect is anything but harmless. I once confided in someone about a betrayal that shook me deeply. Instead of empathy, I got a shrug and a smirk. "You're really letting this get to you?" In that instant, the pain didn't vanish, it deepened. Now, it wasn't just the betrayal I had to carry. It was the shame of feeling it too much. That's what invalidation does. It tells you that your emotions are the problem, not what caused them. It trains you to silence yourself before anyone else can. But the Stoics never taught us to numb. They taught us to understand, to feel without being ruled, and to see emotion as a compass, not a curse. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is endurable, then endure it. If it is not, stop complaining." But this wasn't dismissal. It was self-possession, a call to trust your inner knowing, not abandon it. People who constantly invalidate others aren't emotionally superior. They're emotionally uncomfortable. Your honesty unsettles their illusion of control. So they push it away, not to help you, but to protect themselves. So what do? First, notice the pattern. If someone constantly downplays your pain, mocks your joy, or redirects the spotlight every time you speak your truth, that's not support. That's suppression. Second, reclaim your inner voice. You don't need permission to feel. You don't need validation to process what's real. And most of all, protect your space. Because your emotions are not flaws to be fixed. They are signals. And the people worthy of you are the ones who listen, not the ones who erase. If someone repeatedly makes you feel like too much, maybe it's because they're used to giving so little. 12. The energy chameleon, when they become what you need, until you don't. At first, they feel like a soulmate, a best friend, a mirror of your soul. They like what you like. They believe what you believe. They laugh at your jokes, cry when you cry, and always seem to understand you better than anyone else ever has. But over time, something begins to shift. You start noticing subtle inconsistencies. Things they once believed, they don't anymore. Values they used to echo, they quietly contradict. The energy feels off. The warmth starts to flicker. And suddenly you're left wondering, who was I even talking to this whole time? That's the moment the mask slips. What you were dealing with wasn't authenticity, it was adaptation. Not connection, but strategy. You were never really seen. You were studied, mirrored, reflected back to yourself as bait. This is the energy chameleon. A person who doesn't build identity, they borrow it. Not to belong, but to bind. They become exactly who you need, until your needs no longer serve them. And then the transformation begins. They grow distant, cold, sometimes cruel. Not because you've changed, but because you've stopped being useful. Epictetus warned us, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. But these individuals have no core beliefs to embody, only masks to wear. So how do you spot them? Watch for consistency, not just across conversations, but across time, space, and people. Do they speak the same when you're alone as they do in public? Do their values shift depending on who they're with? And most importantly, do they support you, or do they shape themselves to control you? Real connection doesn't require mimicry. It embraces difference. It brings two distinct souls together, not two versions of the same reflection. So if someone always agrees, always adapts, always blends, ask yourself, are they showing up as themselves, or showing you who you want to see? Because the ones who change masks easily rarely wear a real face at all. And in a world full of shapeshifters, your peace lies in surrounding yourself with those who are rooted, grounded, whole, not perfect, but real. 13. The endless crisis, when their life is always on fire and you're always holding the hose. Some people don't live with problems. They live in them. And whether consciously or not, they invite you to live there too. At first, it's subtle. They always seem to be going through something. A breakup, a betrayal, a financial disaster, a new health scare. And you, being the caring, grounded person you are, step in. You listen. You advise. You show up. But over time, you realize it never ends. Every week, a new emergency. Every conversation, a new collapse. They drain your energy, hijack your peace, and reshape your schedule to orbit their emotional weather. And worst of all, they never truly want resolution. Because peace means quiet, and quiet means facing themselves. I once had a friend who lived in permanent panic. At first, I mistook it for bad luck. Then I thought, maybe trauma. But after years of fires that never burned out, only reignited, I understood the truth. Chaos was her comfort zone, and my compassion was her oxygen. Marcus Aurelius cautioned us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But that strength dissolves when we mistake emotional rescue for love. When we become the firefighter in someone else's endless inferno, without ever asking, is this mine to carry? So how do you know when someone's chaos isn't just bad timing, but a behavioral pattern? Watch the loop. Are the same stories repeating? Do solutions ever stick? Do they reflect or just vent? Then check in with yourself. Do you feel energized or emotionally exhausted after every interaction? Are you helping or being drained? Because here's the hard truth. Not every emergency is real, and not every problem needs your saving. Some people don't want support. They want a stage, and they want you to sit front row. But your peace is not a subscription. You can love someone deeply and still leave the fire they keep setting. Let them find stillness on their own. You were never meant to live in crisis. You were meant to breathe. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it speaks in soft tones, cloaked in concern, generosity, even love. But now you've seen the patterns, the manipulation, the masked charm, the lies, the control, the blame, the subtle wounds disguised as kindness, the chaos, the shadows, the silence that follows your pain. You've seen them not just in others, but maybe if you're honest, you've seen glimpses in yourself too. And that's okay, because awareness is not judgment. It's liberation. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. These 13 signs, they're not just red flags. They're mirrors, opportunities to protect your peace, guard your mind, and reclaim your clarity. You don't need to fight anyone. You don't need to fix them. You only need to see and choose. Choose boundaries. Choose truth. Choose freedom. Because your life isn't meant to be lived in emotional debt. It's not your job to carry the wounds of those who refuse to heal. And it's not your responsibility to trade your sanity for someone else's comfort. So breathe. Step back and step into the life that's waiting for you on the other side of chaos. A life built not on fear, but on integrity. Not on control, but on clarity. Not on performance, but on peace. You're not overreacting. You're awakening. If this video made you pause, if you saw a little too much truth in one of these signs, know this: you're not alone. You're not crazy. And you're not powerless. Comment below, I see the signs. Let others know they're not imagining it either. Let this space be where clarity begins, not where doubt grows. If this message spoke to something deep in you, hit that like button to support the channel. And subscribe so you never miss the tools, stories, and stoic wisdom you need to stay grounded in a noisy world. And remember, your mind is your sanctuary. Guard it like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay sharp, stay free,